So today I just want to talk about, first of all, what is a 360 deal? I mean, that's, you know, like telling cows about grass, but not that you're cows, but, you know, just kind of talking about the basic outline of it. That way, if you're not familiar with a multi-rights deal, we'll just kind of briefly cover that. I also want to talk about what music technology is, because even at MTSU, we call it recording, or you call it recording industry, and then there's an audio production track, there's a music business, there's many different tracks. At Purdue, we call it music technology, and that actually means something quite different. So we'll get into that, talking about what music technology actually is. And then one of the things I want to do is compare artists' and students' values. So when we're talking about artists' values, in other words, why they value 360 deals, versus students looking to matriculate in a music technology program, how those values are similar. And that's really the purpose of this presentation, is to talk about how we can use some of the values that artists have, compare them to some of the values students have. And then calculating value, there will be equations. They're sort of qualitative in nature, so, but it helps us sort of evaluate that. Oh, the picture just got better. It's really bizarre. And then we'll have time for questions and a short discussion. So just real quickly, so like I said, the purpose is comparing artist values and student values. So is there a meaningful similarity between why do artists commit to 360 deals and why do students attend music technology programs? When I was first thinking about this topic, especially for MEIEA, I was thinking doing it for recording industry programs. And that might be something that I'll look at in the future, but I figured I'd stay in my wheelhouse, which is sort of the music technology, audio production, sound recording technology area. And once again, it's not to say that any of the criticism that a 360 deal has, I'm not trying to compare music technology programs to that, but rather I'm talking about how, wow, this situation feels kind of similar in a way, and maybe some of the values that artists have can be compared to some of the things that music technology students are looking for in a degree. And you may disagree with this whole proposition, and that's fine. There's coffee in the lobby. Okay, so multiple rights deals. So just really going over a 360 deal in a very basic way. You know, we're talking about, you know, the trend over the last 15 years or so of you know, recording labels getting a larger percentage of revenue that was previously off limits. Let's see here, I'll kind of go through this quickly. So in exchange for getting a bigger cut from artists, they represent labels are committed to now promoting the artist for a longer period of time, develop new opportunities for them, especially like synergistic opportunities where they have a certain song and there's a certain product. There also becomes this weird sort of pseudo-manager situation that can happen, and then the entire artist's entire career not only just selling records, where, you know, perhaps in the past there was a very specific term, not that there's not a specific term now, but we're looking at a much larger chunk of sort of the artist's entire experience, not just selling a specific album. And this has been the trend, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I talked about some of the notable deals. I think the Paramore one with Atlantic Records, that's often cited as one of sort of the most historic ones. The Robbie Williams with EMI in 2002, that's brought up as sort of a fairly important one. And then the Live Nation, Madonna and Jay-Z as recent as in 2008. You know, these are, and that's really not that recent, that's a decade ago. But just sort of looking at you know, some of these notable deals. And that's something too, just as a benchmark for you, if you're trying to look up what a 360 deal is, I think if you're just trying to get some basic information about it, these are some really good specific cases to look at and kind of interpret. So obviously there's criticism about 360 deals, there's cynical money grabbing, labels are facing dwindling sales and high overhead. One of the big complaints too was band branding versus quality. So one of the classic examples is a group called the Pussycat Dolls, who were burlesque dancers, and then they became this music entity, this music product. And there was a lot of criticism about that. Was that more about who they were as an image, as a product, more than the music? Of course, if you think about somebody who was talking about the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears in a previous paper presentation, obviously there was a lot of image in that as well. You know, a lot of the upside that a lot of people don't talk about or is not as focused on is, you know, it allows, you know, these labels somewhat some flexibility in who they're actually signing. They're not as obsessed, I mean, they're still obsessed with recouping investments from album sales, but then they don't have to be as focused on instant numbers. They can look at things in a longer scale, but then in 2017, I don't even know how, you know, how true of a perspective that really is anyways. To be able to really look at things too long term. So what is a degree in music technology? So let's just take a poll real quickly. Anybody that knows something about music technology, how would you define music technology? Anybody? Does anybody want to? We didn't have to answer questions. Well, I do point out here in the slides, you know, kind of this general area. I think depending on the program, people might say, well, it's very much into this area, the mixing, or it's very much into the recording aspect. Some might say, well, that's a different program, that's sound recording technology, or that's a different degree. Someone might say, well, new sounds, performing, well, that's more composition, that's more electronic-based composition, that's something different. You know, so, but I think music technology is great in that it encapsulates all these aspects, right? But then, in the same respect, I think it's kind of vague, which is difficult as well. Here's some students actually working in the Clear Lab, so they look happy. I paid them $10 a piece to look at them. They're not actually happy. When we look at the different types of music technology degrees, this is from a great book from the Scott Phillips book, Beyond Sound. He does a great job of just breaking down music technology into a larger perspective. And really when he talks about the different bachelors versus bachelors of fine art, and bachelors of science, and bachelors of music, he breaks it down to their classification being professional versus liberal arts, or a competency-based education. And really, that just comes down to the percentage. The way it's classified just comes down to the percentage of classes that you have in the major. So obviously the liberal arts, if you look, is the most spread out over major general education and electives, which is true about any liberal arts program. So there's basically 4 programs for music technology students, but then on top of that, so there's 4 programs and then there's kind of all these subsets as well. The more confusing part is that, well, and then so usually the area of rigor in a Bachelor of Music is music theory, ear training, history, applied instruments, and ensembles. So there's a core of music involved in this. I went to, oh, he's not here anymore, but I went to the Hart School originally, which was the Conservatory of Music, University of Hartford, and it was a Bachelor of Music, and I did have an applied instrument, and I did sing in a choir and an ensemble, and I had almost 2 years of music theory and ear training and history before we even got in the studio. Whereas like a program like at MTSU, there were a few courses in musicianship, and then even at IUPUI, where I am now at Purdue, there's this weird mix between music theory and then also technical labs that happen very early in their career at the college. So there's all these different mixtures, and then really the way they're defining these programs are by the field of rigor. If you look at the Bachelor of Science, traditionally, science, computer programming, engineering, and electronics are the field of rigor for this Bachelor of Science degree. But that being said, we all know and work at Bachelor of Science, or there are many Bachelor of Science degrees that do not focus on this. They maybe look more like a Bachelor of Music. I mean, this is why we have accrediting bodies and NASM, but it adds to the confusion. The biggest thing that really adds to the confusion, and I feel somebody, you know, AES does a lot of work with this, the Audio Engineering Society, but really settling on a program title that relates specifically to the degree they're awarding. If you just look at the words on the program titles for these different programs, they all have the same words. It's almost like somebody took these words in a hat, shook them up, and said, here we go. So we have audio in all categories, we have sciences. In the Bachelor of Music, we have recording arts and sciences. So, so what the program's actually named can also, not misleading is not the right word, but can add to some confusion, thinking if you're a 16, 17-year-old student contemplating going to university. So really for music technology degrees, one of the big things that I offer to the students, some of the things they should be focusing on, and a lot of times they're doing this at high schools because that's a great place to start, especially those of the students that are maybe interested in this and want to know what the next step is. So really they should be looking at the educational philosophy of the particular institution, the fields of rigor, in other words, how many credit hours of courses they're going to be taking within that major, and that relates directly to the credit hours. Students, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, should not focus on program name or degree type. They should really, even if the degree says it's a Bachelor of Music, they should look at the fields of rigor and the credit hours that are allotted in different areas, because depending on their accreditation, they could be a Bachelor of Music and be accredited by NASM, or they could be a Bachelor of Science like we are at Purdue School of Engineering, and yet we're NASM accredited, so we have some other commitments to have a core courses in music. So just to kind of move forward here, so what I wanted to do is to talk about music, offer something for music technology students, especially like I said for high school students entering programs, how to evaluate them. So one of the things is looking at what artists in 360 deals, what they're valuing, what they're looking for. Why would they ever sign these deals where they're giving away a lot of other revenue streams? Maybe they're not being given as much money up front. And then there's this larger long-term commitment that they have on those revenue streams. So I looked at some of the major areas, and later I made an equation, but I was really looking at publicity, their own personal satisfaction, strategic relationships that they can make, ideals and their own goals, as well as their own growth. And I'll get further into that here in a second. But yeah, students usually entering a music technology program, cost is a big factor. Location is a big factor. I sit on auditions for our music technology program at the Purdue School of Engineering, and we ask them, so why Purdue, why are you here? Not many of them get into cost, but they say, oh, well, it's right down the street. I live in Indiana. I have, well, what they often will say is, I live within the state, which links then to, obviously, in-state, out-of-state tuition or whatever. And a lot of times, too, they're looking at career goals. Even though they might be misguided, they might come in and just say, well, I want to be a producer. And so my follow-up question is, well, what's a producer? And they're like, well, I don't know, that's your job, right, to tell me what that is, right? They don't say that, they're not that sharp. But yeah, yeah, so just looking at, educational philosophy and skills. So what I wanted to do is get away from this equation, which is actually, inadvertently, specifically or inadvertently, a lot of students and their families are making a college decision based on this equation. Actually, schools and colleges use this to determine EFC, which is family contribution. They use this, I believe, actually in FAFSA loans. They do this as one way to figure out how much a student should be awarded, or just dealing with their financial situation. So the cost formula basically looks at basically the cost of attendance minus any family contribution. Okay, and the cost of attendance includes a lot of different things. I go in here specifically what it is. Talking about health insurance, resident hall, full meal plan, comprehensive fees, any kind of mandatory laptops, that type of thing. One thing that's in my equation that I think is particular to music technology and other degrees, the opportunity cost of attending a college versus entering an industry. So, I mean, in 2007, I mean, you have to have a serious conversation if one can really just enter an industry without having a formal education. And I think you can argue, and I think people have strong feelings either way. But that's one thing that I like to include to this equation as well, is what could you potentially be earning in those 4 years that you're at college? What could you be potentially earning if you were not in school? But here's the big one, and oh no, here's the big one. This is sort of the new formula that I've been working on to help students think a little bit more critically about why choosing institution A over institution B. And I basically call it the personal value percentage, okay? It's super easy math, and it's very qualitative in nature because it's something that's very specific to each student. So I could do a personal value percentage for University A, and then somebody else could do the same personal value percentage, and they'd be completely different. But I think that's great because I think each person has different, requirements and things that they need in their lives to have a successful career. So basically, the way it works out is you look at these different categories, which we'll talk about in a second. You add them together, and it just gives you a percentage out of 100. So the closer you get to 100, in what, 60 or 70 passing? Depends who you ask, right? But there's no pass and fail in this, but really the closer you get to 100%, the better. So some of the factors that we're looking at in this equation are publicity. So publicity basically deals with name recognition and prestige. So you could argue that name has nothing to do with the school or a reason for matriculating at a university, and I would say grow up if you said that to me. Because I think the name and where you go, the name itself and the associations, we won't get into that yet, but the name itself has a certain prestige, it has a certain gravitas. It can, when you're looking at 250 resumes, or you're networking with somebody in a concert real quickly, and you mention that you went to their alma mater, or at a prestigious institution that they know, that can give you 5 more seconds to maybe get a phone number to somebody or hand somebody a card. So I think publicity is an important part. Personal satisfaction. Will you enjoy being there? I think a lot of times students will come into these auditions and they'll be like, well, you're right down the road. And we're like, well, yeah, but will you really enjoy being here in Indianapolis? Do you enjoy this? Because the big thing is if they resent going there and they're not actually enjoying physically being there, they're not going to make connections, they're not going to be engaged. And also then, the next category, they're not going to make these strategic relationships. And we talk about that definitely in college, and one of the, I think, really strong parts about attending a 4-year university are the strategic relationships that you make. And those relationships continue on throughout your career. So many times I've been like, oh, well, yeah, we would go with this, but we're going to go with this other person because he went to my alma mater, or she was affiliated with my institution. Let's give them an opportunity to intern or give them a chance. They also have to think about what their ideals and goals are. What do you want from a degree? And how is that specific program meeting it? Can you actually grow at that particular university? And what employable skills will you learn at that particular university? So I think this equation, the cost equation, married with the personal value equation and the concept behind that, I think can give you a better picture behind, especially for a student, can give them a better picture about why an institution would be better for them than another. And then also, I talk about this. I've talked about I've had other presentations for like an AES where I've gotten really detailed into the cost of living, the amount of loans, and the amount of debt that has been incurred by going to a music technology program. And we get into the nitty-gritty of how many weeks they can go eating ramen noodles. But this is also another question too, the idea of what's going to be your annual profit after attending an institution. And that's based on basically the cost of living plus the loans that you have to pay. So our music technology degree is a 360 deal? Of course not. But what are the best ways to evaluate or to evaluate the value of a music technology degree. And I don't mean just in general or a way to discount a program, but how, as a student entering a college, how do they really, in a holistic way, both quantitative and qualitatively, how do they evaluate that degree? And can the factors artists value inform students looking to earn a music technology degree? Also, I was thinking too, are these values a better way to promote and advertise our programs? So in other words, when we're promoting and advertising our own specific programs, should we be focusing less on this equation and more on some of these personal values, right? I saw a great presentation by Bill and Odie earlier, and they were talking about the songwriting recording course that they had put together. It was a fantastic idea, and one of the coolest things about it were all the different session musicians and Nashville professionals that they were incorporating in this. And so when you start talking about some of the strategic relationships, when you start talking about publicity, and then you also talk about employable skills, that was a really great idea. That's a really great course project that they put together. So how often is University X, how often are they putting together these type of either courses or situations where, where I'm having the opportunities to increase my personal value or increase the personal value of the institution. So I think that's my spiel. Like I said, all this goes up on the Noise Buffalo at Blogspot. There's also a breakdown of those equations a little bit more, and I actually get into a little bit of math about actually calculating a real salary after college opposed to the actual cost. I use a couple of the top music technology schools, so you can check out information there. I guess at this point, are there any questions? I guess talk for about half an hour.
Sorry for language barrier, but I'm still confused. What is music technology? Is it mix everything together like?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know. It depends. Well, and according to the Mark Phillips book, it incorporates recording and production, but it also incorporates performance and synthesis. Basically, using technology to mediate a music situation, whether that's recording it, documenting it, performing it, or creating it. So it's a huge area. It's a very wide.
360 area.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, more of a comment.
Sure.
A few months back, I was actually thinking about this idea of kind of pitching the idea of college or a college degree as a record deal. Because just like with the company, putting their machine behind the artist and promoting them and such, that's what a college essentially does. And in this day and age where higher education tends to be under attack and students are questioning its value, obviously, we know that they're paying for our networks, not just the knowledge, but our networks. And I thought about pitching the idea of a college degree as a signing deal anyway, right? So not just for music technology, but college as a whole.
Well, I think and the big thing that drew me to the comparison, was sort of the uncertainty. The formality of it, that loans, like death and taxes, right? That the loans are going to be there regardless, and then the money that one owes to a record label, that's going to be consistent regardless of what happens. That similarity, that was the first thing that drew me to the same situation, because I saw students kind of being in this similar dynamic where there was a prospect element to it, meaning, if this happens and this happens, then this investment will mean this, or it'll mean this.
Mm-hmm.
And not that it'll be success or gloom and doom, but there'll be everything in between that, from absolute success to bankruptcy.
Doug, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.